or ASC certified technicians. Burt Brothers, affordable, complete auto care done better. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we're sitting at about 10% chance of showers today with lows at 63. Tomorrow we've got more isolated thunderstorms in the forecast with overnight lows at 59 degrees. 72 and mostly cloudy right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The United States House of Representatives is back in session. The first order of business, if you thought the answer to that was fund the government before the September 30th at midnight deadline, you'd have to think again. First order of business was to open an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. The question is this an evidence-based move or is this a distraction from the real job? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
In what is probably the best manifestation that the writers in Hollywood are still on strike is what's going on in our nation's capital, because no one could write a script that bad, except maybe the United States Congress. Earlier today, the House of Representatives, first day back, Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Now, before we react to all the political portions of the program, let's look at it in terms of a process. That's the important thing that we have to look at, because it is a serious thing to open up impeachment inquiry, because it does take time. It forms committees. It grants subpoena power. There's a host of things that happen there. So it is serious business. At the same time, it is also unserious because of the politics that are mixed into all of this that we'll come back to as we rethink what's really going on. So let's start where the day began. Speaker Kevin McCarthy stepped outside of the Speaker's office, held a press conference, and announced formally that the House would launch an impeachment inquiry into President Biden.
House Republicans have uncovered serious and credible allegations into President Biden's conduct. Taken together, these allegations paint a picture of a culture of corruption. Through our investigations, we have found that President Biden did lie to the American people about his own knowledge of his family's foreign business dealings. Now, I do not make this decision lightly. The American people deserve to know that the public offices are not for sale. We are committed to getting the answers for the American public. Nothing more, nothing less.
So following the process, following the truth and the facts, that's good. The Speaker was very careful in terms of his comments, not to go too broad and not to go too deep in terms of the politics of it all. He mentioned the foundation of the findings that is leading to this next step in the process. And this is just a very small step in the process, but saying there clearly was a pattern, whether that was corruption or sloppiness or just things that were maybe a little unseemly but maybe not illegal. Those are all the things that they want to get more answers on and have more questions about. And so that's fine. That's the Speaker's prerogative. They can do that. And so that step has been taken forward. Now, really interesting, the Republican caucus is very split in terms of whether they should be spending time on that particular item right now, given everything else coming towards the end of the month with a potential government shutdown, as Congress struggles to do one of its very few jobs, which is fund the government every year by September 30th. We're going to keep reminding you that that is their job. It's in the Constitution. That's the job. And so we'll keep reminding you about that. So there are some splits, and some very interesting splits, by the way, within the Republican conference in terms of whether or not they should be pursuing this at this stage of the game. In fact, one of the Freedom Caucus members, Colorado Representative Ken Buck, spoke with Jake Tapper over the weekend and revealed that he's not supporting the impeachment effort, at least not yet.
We have three committees that are working very hard on uncovering evidence of Hunter Biden's wrongdoing. They are looking to see if there is a connection with Joe Biden. If they reach that point where they can find evidence of a connection, fine. I think the Republicans will move forward with an impeachment inquiry. Right now, I'm not convinced that that evidence exists, and I'm not supporting an impeachment inquiry.
So again, that was Ken Buck just over the weekend saying, I don't think we're there yet. I haven't seen a connecting of the dots. And one of the things that I've heard from many people in Washington, D.C., is the fact that there is the Hunter Biden issue in all of this. And that is one thing. The president is another. And where those dots connect and intersect is what you've got to figure out. And there are many on the political right that say, we haven't seen the evidence yet to show that direct connection to the president. So some in the Republican side are still kind of saying, hold on, let's not go too fast on this. Let's make sure that the evidence supports the next step in the process. Now, South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace also made an appearance over the weekend to talk about impeachment effort and was a little crass in terms of the political calculation of what she thought the Republicans in Congress were attempting to do.
But the problem is we will never get 60 votes in a Democrat-controlled Senate no matter how much evidence we prevent. And so from my perspective, the House Oversight, Judiciary, Ways and Means need to continue our investigations. We need to show the American people all of the evidence that we uncover. We need to do it in swift order. We need more subpoenas. I want everybody who was a witness and saw what we saw in the suspicious activity reports, that information we have to win in the court of public opinion.
Okay, so here's where we have to be very careful and tread very lightly. So the first part of the South Carolina representative, I think she's fine. Looking at the reality of what's going on, the process that needs to be followed, the fact that it is Congress's job to continue investigations, to show the American people evidence, to have subpoena power in order to get more evidence. But then she shifted into something that's much more political and saying, well, we know there aren't 60 votes to impeach the president in the United States Senate, so we just need to win in the court of public opinion. And that's where you lose me. This is not about scoring political points. This is not about just trying to win in the court of public opinion. No, that's not your job. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. Your job is not to win in the court of public opinion. Your job is to do the right thing according to the Constitution and the law. That's the job. It's not about winning. It's not winning in the public opinion, especially not in public opinion. That's not the job. If you're going to have a formal inquiry to impeach a president, you follow the process, you follow the facts, you get to the truth, and that's what it's all about. The rest will take care of itself. The job is not just to say, well, we know we can't actually win this thing, but we think we can score a lot of points in the sphere of public opinion. That's a wrong goal, wrong job. If you want to go be a commentator on cable news, that's a different animal. So there are clearly some things that are going to be conflicting and some things that are going to collide over the course of the next several weeks as it relates both to the inquiry into impeachment against the president and the funding of the government, which, oh, by the way, still has to be done by September 30th. That's still the job. So the important thing is that we continue to keep the right job, the most important job, the most important job. And those that are looking into any wrongdoings by the president, again, there's the components of Hunter Biden, and those things need to be pursued. If there was preferential treatment, if things weren't done properly, that's all one thing. If there were direct connections to the president, then it's a whole new ballgame. And so those are things that are part of the process. But the process is not supposed to be the political process. The process is supposed to be the truth process, the facts process, and to lay out the case process. Not to score points, not to get likes and clicks, not to raise campaign cash, not to try to get everybody ginned up and excited about the 2024 presidential election season. That is not the job. And so while that does look like a really bad script, not written by Hollywood writers that are all on strike, only Congress could create a script this bad. It's the wrong script for the wrong time when we have some very serious things to do as a nation. We have serious issues to have conversations about. And let's not make targeting political opponents become the norm in the nation, because that will undo the nation in the end.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. This autumn, fall for the KSL hosts who share this community with you and report on Utah's most important stories. Depend on Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Listen to Dave and Dejanovic at 9, Boyd Matheson at 1, and Jeff Kaplan on the ride home from 3 to 7. We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Getting close to retirement? Or have you retired? You've probably got a ton of stress-filled questions on your mind. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth. Getting a second opinion with an individualized investment plan is vital, and our fiduciary advisors do just that. Take it from this Trajan Wealth client.
It was just so pleasant, so comfortable. I think we had 7 different accounts, just stuff scattered all over the place. And then so we just started, here's this, move this. And he even explained it a couple different times. But if I have more questions, he said, just give us a call. And that's what I love. He's a phone call away. I'm glad I know these guys. Such a huge weight off my shoulder.
Imagine not second-guessing investments or monthly retirement income. That's the peace of mind you'll get from working with Trajan Wealth. Call 801-899-7600 today or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Actual client, no compensation, no conflicts. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Hey guys, are you over 30? Let's talk about testosterone and performance. Your testosterone can decline at an average of 1 to 2% a year after you turn 30. And Revive Men's Health have been experts at treating men with low testosterone and ED since 2011. We're the clinic guys come to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their performance. We love what we do and the patients we care for. You can ask our patients. We did, and we have a 99% patient satisfaction rate this year. Our patients even tell us we're more affordable than their insurance deductibles and copays. Let's get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. That's what we do, and we do it really well. Book your T-Check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or send us a private message at ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by 2 guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100 or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Take a second and think about how many different software systems you have in order to manage the people who work for you, and of course the people you want to work for you. There's the applicant tracking, the new hire onboarding, your paid time off, your payroll, time and attendance, your online employee benefits enrollment, ACA compliance, your COBRA compliance, and the list is not just daunting, but it seems every time you turn around, it's growing. It's time you quit losing sleep over that list and let someone else do it for you. Magellan HCM has the technology and local service team to pull all those systems and services into one place, simplifying the process for everyone and significantly reducing the errors that will always occur when you're managing all those tasks in different systems. There is a better way. Magellan HCM. Text HCM to 57500 and set up a demo of their highly awarded technology and see for yourself what a difference Magellan can make for you and your company. Text HCM to 57500.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dale Spalding. First, a man is in the ICU after getting attacked by a grizzly bear just south of a resort town in Montana. Rudy Norlander suffered injuries to his face and body, but he's able to communicate in writing. Second, we're starting to see gas prices drop a tiny bit following Labor Day. AAA shows Utah's average price for a gallon of regular is still 40 cents above the national average. Third, an uptick of coyote encounters in Sandy and Draper are affecting residents and their pets. Keeping garbage cans inside your garage and motion detection lights can help deter coyotes. Right now, it's 80 degrees and mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Of course, the House just reconvened today, which means we've got a whopping 10 legislative days until we get to September the 30th. And we'll remind, just in case any members of Congress are listening today, September 30th always comes every single year like clockwork, and so does the fiscal and legislative duty to fund the government. So there should never be a surprise that this day is coming. How members of Congress have dealt with it shows that they've often been very unserious about the job and being way too comfortable doing a continuing resolution. And really pleased to have joining us on the program today Kevin Kosar. Kevin's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He's also the host of Understanding Congress podcast. And Kevin and I were sort of tag team partners today on thehill.com. I went to the unserious side of what Congress is doing going towards September 30th. Kevin looked at it historically and why we're heading this direction when it comes to the shutdown showdown this year. And Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Boy, thank you for having me back.
All right. So I kind of went not a pessimistic route, but we've got to do this different, guys, kind of approach. And you looked at this into some historic context in terms of why we are driving, seems on a very regular basis, to do this shutdown showdown gig. Where we have the fake fight, the false choice, and another continuing resolution. You went through 4 specific things in terms of why you think we're continuing down this path. Let's kick through those.
Sure. Well, first off, this budget process is laborious. There's a ton of steps. And, one of the crazier aspects of it is that the 2 chambers, the ones that have to agree upon a bill, they don't spend much time working together. So we often find ourselves in a situation where, tick-tock, a couple of weeks left till the fiscal year ends, and we have the Senate with 12 bills, the House with 12 bills, and the bills don't line up. This is the process. It's not an easy process, and it's only gotten more difficult, and this leads me to reason 2, is party competition.
Yeah.
Party competition to control the chamber is more fierce over the last 30 years than it's been since the late 19th century. And parties see a logic in not working with the other side. And, if you're in the minority, let the majority screw up. Let them accidentally shut down the government or force them to the very last minute to succumb to your demands. That's the kind of logic that they see. And it's exacerbated this year because, Democrats control the Senate, Republicans control the House. Yikes.
Yeah, and everyone's trying to jockey for that 2024 positioning and who's actually going to shut this thing down. And a lot of times it seems that, the party not in power just wants to pop popcorn and just watch until the end. As you said, it's a challenging process to go through, but Congress knows this is the job, and they have a whole year to do it every year. And yet we keep coming back to this. And you actually noted in your piece at thehill.com today that 40 years ago, this wasn't even like a radical concept in terms of having a government shutdown. Now it seems to be a little bit more of the norm of the process.
Yeah. 40 years ago, we had, for the most part, Democrats controlled majorities in both chambers reliably. And they acted like a permanent majority, and Republicans tended to treat them as a permanent majority. And so there was a lot of cross-party bargaining on all the appropriations bill. It was shared work. Those days are gone. And now it's very much treated as a party line process. It feeds into that whole kind of competitive logic or bad competition that I described. Another factor that's rolled in is the state of the budget 40 years ago was much healthier than it is today. Both parties, for the most part, have surrendered any sense of fiscal responsibility. But within the Republican Party, particularly the House, you have a faction, House Freedom Caucus and a few others, who say this is madness. We have to control the spending, but they don't have any real tools to do anything other than to say, well, we're going to try to shut the government down. Or we're going to, vote no on increasing the debt. These are the crude tools that they grab for because they don't see another way to win because, again, they're a minority.
Yeah, I love your framing of that in terms of it's no longer shared work. I think that's an important topic. I want to come back to that on another day with you because I think there's some things in there that we should be talking about more and that we should be expecting more as voters and as citizens of the country, that shared work and that shared responsibility. Because as you said, Kevin, there isn't a shared responsibility anymore. We're equal opportunity offenders on this show, so it is both Republicans and Democrats that are spending like drunken sailors, which I know is offensive to drunken sailors because we're $32 trillion in debt, and so then it gets harder. And so digging just a little deeper, you talked about some of those, the Freedom Caucus and others who are kind of left with just blunt force instruments because there is no shared work or no shared process. Just explain that a little bit for us.
Yeah. The appropriators, they have their committees. They control the power of the purse. And these committees are ruled by whichever party is in the majority at the moment. And they can pass the bills out of committee along party lines. There's no requirement that they get any buy-in from anybody else. And then when it goes to the chamber, they are going to operate under the assumption that, well, our party's the majority. They're going to pass it on the party line. And we're just going to jam the other house and hope that the other house agrees to what we want, which, of course, never happens.
Funny thing about that, yeah.
Yeah. It's remarkable how many times the same play is run and you get the same result and people don't seem to learn. But I think you suggested, that there's also an element of we, the voters, are complicit here.
Yeah.
Because when's the last time any of us showed up to a voting booth and thought, my vote for this candidate who wants re-election to the House or Senate is going to be determined based upon whether he played a positive role in the appropriations process? I don't think anybody does that, which means politicians individually feel very little individual responsibility to answer to the voters on this. They can always shift the blame. They can always say, well, it was the other party that did this, or, well, I tried, but these other people stopped me.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of it. And there is a we the people component to it that, we keep sending 90 to 94% of incumbents are winning every election cycle. And we always call it the Dennis Rodman syndrome. Everyone hates Dennis Rodman unless he's your Dennis Rodman. And then somehow it's okay. Or all the other members of Congress are horrible and awful. Ours may be just a little less horrible and awful, but they're ours. And so it's okay. But we really do have to have a different kind of conversation in terms of the process and following the process to see what's actually going on, because that's the only way we can ever hold them accountable and get to the point where we can say, okay, Congress, if you don't like doing one of the few jobs that is outlined in the Constitution for you to do, if you don't want to do that job, we'll help you get a job somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think to some degree, rejiggering the process to have more legislators have a skin in the game would be helpful.
Yeah.
I think many members are excluded from the process, and it makes it easier for them to sit on the sideline and hoot. And it's also the case that, these government shutdowns are not good, but they're not full-on shutdowns. It's easy for a legislator to stand up and say, we're going to close the government down, because you know what? You're not having the U.S. military walk off their job. You're not having the border control agents not show up the next day. You're not having air traffic controllers not be involved in those day-to-day responsibilities that are sort of important. So we have shutdowns, but the legislators don't bear the full consequence of them because we have this way of fudging and saying, well, even though we don't have money for these government functions, these things are so essential that we're just going to let them keep going. And then we'll pay these people, eventually.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And I do agree that having more legislators involved in the process, more skin in the game, as you said, Kevin, is so important. And then actually having some real accountability in terms of consequences for not doing the job. Absolutely vital. Great piece in The Hill, thehill.com today. Kevin Kosar, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and also host of Understanding Congress podcast. Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Boyd.
Great conversation there with Kevin Kosar and so many things to hit. We'll continue to have the conversation here on KSL News Radio. More Inside Sources coming up next.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dale Spalding. KSL's top story this hour: the Salt Lake County Animal Shelter is adopting out free dogs this month, and a healthy adoptable dog could be yours for free. KSL News Radio's Alexandria Bonilla reports.
Salt Lake County Animal Services is waiving all adoption fees for the first 10 dogs every Saturday. But if Saturday isn't a good day for you, adoption fees will be dropped to just $10 all month long. Mountain West veterinary specialists are helping the shelter out during this time of overflow, offering an incentive to take a pup home.
The shelter is also looking for families willing to foster dogs. More than 80,000 cases of sextortion against children are reported every day, with just as many boys affected as girls. Experts say it is critical for parents to know what their kids are doing on social media.
If you're doing it when the bad thing has already happened and maybe you haven't been involved along the way, helping your teen or preteen understand how to engage social media abuse is going to be really important.
That's licensed psychologist and BYU professor Tom Golightly, who says parents need to approach their kids in a non-judgmental way. He says it's the criminal who's done something wrong, not your child. We have an update from Lehigh this morning where health officials say there have been no new cases of E. coli following a recent outbreak. There were 12 cases, all of which were children or teens. Half resulted in hospitalization. But according to Lehigh officials, the last irrigation water exposure related to E. coli was on August 4th. The city's water department will continue to monitor and treat the Sandpit Reservoir until the end of the irrigation season on October 15th. Your money at this moment: the Dow is down 32 points and the NASDAQ is down 143 points. Coming up, showers and clouds in the forecast. KSL weather is next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Swing a loop for excitement at Beatty Days 2023, Friday, October 27th through the 30th. It's a weekend of fun with Old West shootouts, the ICS Chili Cook-Off, 2K 5K race, live music, bed races, a desert art show, classic car show, a cornhole toss, model railroads, vendors, and contests for everyone. Just 95 miles from Las Vegas. It's Beatty Days, October 27th through the 30th. Discover the Old West at its best. Visit BeattyNevada.org.
Klein Tools are new at Lowe's, pros. Lowe's knows you want top brands and quality products, and Klein Tools delivers. Right now, get the Klein 3-piece ModBox mobile workstation for $319.94 and the Klein 5-piece cushion grip screwdriver set for just $34.97, both exclusively at Lowe's. Shop the largest selection of Klein tools, the highest quality tool brand at Lowe's. Because Lowe's knows tools, Lowe's knows pros.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Dave and Debbie.
Where do people in Utah have an opportunity on a regular basis to voice their opinions? That's on our show on KSL News Radio. You have a way to share your experiences and to get your message out to the entire community. Where else in Utah can they go? Nowhere. That's on our show.
We have to be so careful not to take things out of context. It's very easy to manipulate what someone says to fit your own narrative. And we don't want to do that. We want to take your best argument, you take my best argument, and if we don't always say it perfectly, that's okay. It's a conversation. It's a give and take.
Listeners call the show and are willing to share how they're dealing with life circumstances. This is why our show is so important to this community and why our listeners are so important to KSL News Radio.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A new accident in Salt Lake County. This is northbound I-15 as you're approaching the 6 South exit to downtown. Crews have already been able to get it moved out of traffic to the shoulder. With over 30-plus specialties and multiple locations across Utah, Revere has you covered for all your health needs. Revere Health, your partner in health, your partner for life. Online at reverehealth.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, you can expect a 20% chance of showers and a high of 83 in Salt Lake City. Tonight, we've got partly cloudy skies as we cool off to 63. Right now, it is 81 degrees and mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The antitrust lawsuit against tech giant Google begins today, making it the first lawsuit by the Justice Department against big tech to go to trial. So the question is, what is Google being accused of doing? What's at stake in this case? What happens if Google wins? What happens if Google loses? Really pleased to have joining us on the program Jennifer Huddleston, the Technology Policy Research Fellow at the Cato Institute, and a great piece there. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start by just helping our listeners just give us a good framing in terms of what is going on, what is Google being accused of, and what's kind of the framework as we look at the beginning of this trial.
Right. So this trial has been coming for a bit. Largely what's at question here has to do with Google's search product. So that's what many people think of when they think of the kind of classic Google search engine, even though Google and its parent company Alphabet have many more products in play. The question here is Google a monopoly in search? And if so, is it abusing that monopoly power to do things like make itself the default search engine in certain browsers or to manipulate search engine advertising? That's what the DOJ and the attorneys general of several states have accused Google of in this case. But I think it's important to really step in and to take a step back and think about why is it that Google is popular when we know that there are so many alternatives out there?
Yeah, and I think that is an interesting part to all of us. Is the natural competition actually dealing with this status as a monopoly? Will that continue to change and evolve, especially with AI? As you look at the case unfolding, these typically are not fast-moving cases when it comes to antitrust kinds of things. What are you watching for? What are you expecting to see as this unfolds?
One of the big questions is going to be that question of market definition and whether or not the courts are going to accept this definition that the Department of Justice has put forward. We saw this in a previous era when we saw the kind of browser wars involving Microsoft a few decades ago. We've seen now this increased scrutiny of today's leading tech companies. And the question is this going to end up being kind of like the browsers war case was? By the time the Microsoft case went through the process, we've largely moved beyond those questions, and there was a lot more innovation in the mobile space. Right now, when we're talking about search is rapidly evolving, not only with things like ChatGPT and AI changing the way we may do kind of online searches, but also with some interesting generational shifts that are going on. Gen Z is increasingly turning towards video-first platforms, things like TikTok, when it conducts search. And then we also have the rise of various voice assistants, the growth of people just asking their smartphone or asking an in-home device to conduct a search instead. So we still have this quite dynamic and ever-evolving idea of what even search may look like.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of the conversation. And one of the things that you pointed out in your piece that really got me thinking is that we shouldn't always approach these kinds of things, especially around antitrust, with this mindset that big is necessarily bad. It can be, but it's not always bad. Give us an example on what that looks like.
Right. So the question is not how big is a company. The question is, why is a company big? If a company is big and successful because it offers a superior product that consumers are flocking to, that's something we should be very excited about. We should be proud of companies that are able to innovate and offer better products for consumers, provided that we continue to have a competitive market. And when it comes to technology, what we've seen is that we continue to see innovation not only by these large platforms themselves like Google, who have to continue to invest in research and development to remain highly relevant and competitive in these markets and are competing amongst each other, but also in the way that innovation continues to disrupt and change what even the underlying idea of search may be.
Yeah. And so as we look at kind of the path forward from here, kind of play out the scenarios for us. What if the Department of Justice wins this case? What does that look like? If they don't, how does that change the dynamic in the marketplace?
I think that's a serious question of what would a remedy look like in this case. Are we actually going to see a situation evolve where when you go to open a browser, it doesn't have a search engine in it on your smartphone? You'd have to go through all these additional steps, and your phone wouldn't be ready out of the box because having something be the default is considered anti-competitive in some ways. I also think there's the question of if you put some kind of regulatory regime on this, are you going to only further cripple innovation in some ways, because you're going to have a company that can't invest in this kind of next wave of technology and remain relevant? So the real question is not just what is this going to mean for Google and their business, but what is this going to mean for consumers? Because at the heart of competition policy should be consumers and the consumer welfare standards.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, Jennifer, because I think we often lose that in all of this. It becomes this one. It's so easy to just demonize, big corporations, and politicians on both sides of the aisles love to use that as a weapon and a way to raise campaign money. But it often distracts us from the actual purpose, which is the consumer, making sure that the consumer is protected in that process. And then the fact that often it ends up helping big, because if you don't have an army of lawyers and lobbyists, then you can't really even compete in a space which inhibits innovation and further hurts the consumer. What is it that you wish we would be having in terms of a different kind of conversation as it relates to antitrust in general?
I think I really wish we would focus back on that question of consumers. That we've seen this real shift in recent years back to this idea that big is bad, or that government is the one who should be intervening in these markets, rather than focusing on consumer choice and on all the benefits that these technologies have had to consumers as well. Most of the time, we're faced with a wider variety of choices than we could have ever imagined, even just a few decades ago, because we continue to see new products evolve and we continue to see new players enter a wide range of technology markets. The question should be, focused on why are we only looking at tech companies? Why are we not looking at why have they been kind of the ones that have been subject to this government scrutiny, when we do continue to see incredible benefits for consumers in the way that we're able to interact with each other and in what we have access to in the palm of our hands?
Such an important part of the conversation. And before I let you go, I just want to ask, tell me something that you're going to be watching as this trial kind of undulates its way along that might give us some indication in terms of where this might be headed.
One of the things I think I'm going to really be watching are these conversations around how are we seeing search defined. We're going to see attempts to make a really narrow definition of search, and in this case, but also the question of what the government tries to put forward as a reason for why Google is popular beyond consumer choice. Yeah. Consumers have a wide array of choices. They're choosing Google. One of the most searched questions on many other search engines is, where is Google? That's because consumers consider this a superior product, and we shouldn't want to punish a company for offering consumers a superior product.
Fantastic insight. Jennifer Huddleston is a Technology Policy Research Fellow at the Cato Institute. This is a great piece. This is great perspective, Jennifer, and we appreciate you teeing that all up for us and breaking it all down so we can make the news make a little more sense today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right, that's Jennifer Huddleston. That's some great insight in terms of what's going on in this antitrust case against Google. So often we just assume big is bad. It's not necessarily the case. And if something is better, we should let consumers get better. That's the way it's supposed to be done. We'll be right back.
It's about to get real for the BYU Cougars.
To the end zone, touchdown!
This Saturday, the Cougs take on Arkansas from the Powerhouse SEC Conference. Our special extended pregame coverage starts at noon with kickoff at 5:30 on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio.
You know, we're moving into fall. Fall's always a great time to do a little reset, to refocus on you and improving yourself. I've done that with SOTA Weight Loss. SOTA stands for state-of-the-art weight loss because it is. It's state-of-the-art. It's that simple. You follow the system. You follow the science. The pounds and inches fall off. I lost 37 pounds in less than 90 days. I'm almost 2 years into this journey now. I'm in the maintenance mode. Just the other day, my coach texted me just to make sure I was on path, see if I had any questions coming out of summer and into fall. You can do exactly the same thing. The results don't lie. You know I always talk about results on this show. SOTA Weight Loss produces results. Pounds and inches go away because it's based on science and a system with your own coach and nutritionist to guide you along the way. And I'm not the only one. There's thousands of people across the country doing the same. As I always say, when it comes to your SOTA Weight Loss journey, there's no time to lose, only time to win. So start winning today. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com, SOTA weightloss.com.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Smart, connected, modern. Discover life-enhancing independent living services at Trio South Ogden. They do things a little differently there because you're different. With everything you need to support your best self, you'll find that joy isn't just for the young, it's for the young of heart. Trio South Ogden's signature programs provide a unique approach to wellness that brings living well and well-being to life. To learn more, contact Trio South Ogden at 801-475-4004 or visit triosouthodden.com.
The Utah RV Super Show, the premier RV event of the year, is back at Mountain America Expo, Thursday, September 14th through Sunday, September 17th. Come see the new 2024 models and special closeout pricing on all 2023 models. Bring a can of food for the Utah Food Bank and get $1 off per can, up to half off adult admission. Unplug from distractions and plug into your family at the Utah RV Super Show. Discount passes at utahRVSupershow.com.
Your one-tank trip starts in Cedar City, Parowan, and Bryan Head. Scenic byways, fabulous fall colors, and more. Visit cedarcity.com.
Join KSL News Radio's Jeff Kaplan on Thursday from 4 till 8 at the Mill Creek Business Market at Mill Creek Common. Join over 40 local businesses at the Mill Creek Business Market and enjoy fresh cut flowers, haircuts, Thai food, skincare products, henna tattoos, jewelry, dog treats and toys, boba, and more. There'll be skating, food trucks, and free twisted sugar drinks and cookies for the first 100 attendees, courtesy of U.S. Bank. It's KSL in your community in Mill Creek with KSL News Radio.
Dave and Dujanovic.
I hope our listeners take away lots of information, but also a new way of looking at a topic.
Ideas, their thoughts, the things they thought they knew. I hope that gets challenged when they listen to us.
I've had listeners stop me at the grocery store and ask me, what is your show about? And I'll tell them our show is anything from politics to your pocketbook.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dale Spalding. First, AAA shows Utah's average price for a gallon of regular is still over 40 cents above the national average. Gas prices in the Beehive State are down about 6 cents from a week ago. Second, an inch of rain made last month the 14th wettest August in the last 129 years. The National Weather Service says this rainfall plus record winter snowmelt has lifted northern Utah out of drought conditions. That has helped stop usually drier tinder from starting fires. Third, workers at 2 burglarized Utah pharmacies are sharing their stories after thieves broke in and stole thousands of dollars worth of opioids. One owner tells KSL TV the burglar targeted thousands of hydrocodone pills, which he estimates could go for $6,000. Right now, it's 81 and mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and we talk about how critical it is for us to get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. And we try to do that every day. And I am so thrilled. I love hallway conversations. I wish all of you could see what happens between KSL News Radio, KSL TV, and the conversations that take place in the hallway. And I always love it when I run into Daniela Rivera and Kira Fairmont because they're doing reporting about some of those uncomfortable conversations. A great piece on KSL TV last night. I know part 2 of it's coming up tonight. And welcome both of you into the studio.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
This is an important case. And Daniela, let's start with you. And just kind of for our listeners, kind of do a little reset in terms of what you've been following, what you've been looking at. We know we have some new laws here in the state of Utah talking about survivors of some of these rape and these violent crimes. Give us some context there.
Certainly. This is a series we've called Failure to Protect. It's a series of investigations looking at gaps in the system and ways in which we might be failing to protect the public. This one in particular looks at a one-of-a-kind law here in Utah. No other state has this. It's called Second Look Review, House Bill 281 in 2019. And essentially, any first-degree felony case that a local prosecutor decides not to pursue, not to file charges, can then be taken and submitted to the Attorney General's office for review, for a second look, potentially for prosecution.
Yeah, so important. And again, having another set of eyes on that, I love that possibility to do that. Again, for especially, are we really protecting those victims? And sometimes I think we've come up a little bit short. And Kira, as you've gone through this process, the two of you are just a flurry of activity when it comes to making these things happen and telling these stories. Give us some perspective from the episode that aired last night, talking about many cases but few prosecutions.
Yeah, so we got some numbers from the Attorney General's office. What they could tell us was they have reviewed cases that involve 66 accusers. And they have filed charges against 4 men. This law has been in place for 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily 66 different perpetrators. Some of these perpetrators did have multiple victims. Okay. But what we know is they've looked at cases that involve 66 accusers, and there's been charges filed in 4.
And so, Danielle, as you've gone through this process and kind of gotten underneath the headlines of it all, what have you actually found, and what seems to be the trend? Why these numbers, and why should we be having this kind of conversation?
Well, I will say what we've learned and what we know is that these are some of the most difficult cases to advance to justice. And the Attorney General's office has said they didn't expect to be filing tons of cases because by the time these reach their office, they've already received a careful look by a local prosecutor. However, we tried to speak with as many people involved in this as we could to get different perspectives. In the piece last night, we heard from a survivor whose case was picked up and prosecuted, and her assailant is now in prison. And she was thrilled that this opportunity existed for her to seek out another chance at having her case reviewed, and it worked out in her favor. We've also spoken with several people who've tried to use this system and walked away with less than stellar reviews of the process itself. Some criticisms there about whether it was a trauma-informed process, whether best practices were being used there. So we had a variety of perspectives in last night's report.
Yeah, and so important. We know the wheels of justice turn very, very slowly, painfully slow, especially for those survivors and those victims. And Kira, give us some perspective on some of those. These are brave souls to even come out in the first place. They're fighting an uphill battle often from the beginning. But what have you learned from your interactions with them?
You know, we talked to several women, and these people, these women have gone, you know, it's one thing to report that you were sexually assaulted, right? It's one thing to follow through with the entire investigation. And then it's another thing to go through the process of maybe having your case prosecuted. And these women have gone through all of that and failed because they didn't get charges, and then they've decided to go to the final place they can go, right? This is their last hope, to go to the AG's office and then to put themselves through that process again. And then to come out at the end and feel not just that their case wasn't charged. A lot of them, that wasn't the concern they had with HB 281. They felt the bigger problem was how they were treated during the investigation.
Yeah, and it's so important to get to that closure component in one way or another. And as you said, in going through your report from last night, I thought, wow, this is not just somebody that wants to make sure that pound of flesh is done, but it's part of their healing process.
Right. It's been called to us by experts procedural justice. Sometimes we can't get justice with a guilty verdict, but there can be procedural justice through the system for victims of crime.
Yeah, so important. And Danielle, give us a tee up for tonight. What are we looking for on tonight's program?
Well, as we talk to some of those women who felt that this process didn't work for them, not only that it didn't work for them, but that they felt it was potentially creating more harm in their lives. Two of these women filed formal complaints with Utah's Council on Victims of Crime. And so tonight we're looking at those complaints, digging deeper in there, and what came of them. I'll give you a little preview. Yeah. There has not been resolution after multiple years, and you're going to hear from the chair of this council who says their process is not working for survivors. And this is the last stop. If you feel as a victim or survivor of crime that your rights have been violated, this is where you go to seek help. And we've heard from people that they feel they got more runaround from the system.
Wow. And Kira, give us just some perspective in terms of what has surprised you the most in this whole process. Listening to both of you, I keep thinking, okay, there's this justice component to it that matters, and there's this process component that matters as well. And just give us some perspective in terms of how you've seen both of those things play.
Right. There's a lot to these cases.
Yeah.
And most of these victims that we talk to, they just want to feel like they got a fair shot. Mm-hmm. They want to feel like someone took them seriously, someone believed them enough to do a full investigation and go through the entire process. Yeah. And a lot of times they just feel like no one's willing to try to go through that process for them.
Yeah, that ability to feel like you were seen, that you were heard, and that you were believed, I think for a lot of these victims is a big piece of that puzzle. And Danielle, we've got just about a minute left. As you guys have gone through this process, your own process in investigating all of this, give us just some of the emotional components. Sometimes we never talk about the storytellers or the report. We read the report, but we don't talk about the reporters and what they've gone through. Give us some perspective there.
Oh, I would say that it's been difficult at times to hear these stories over and over, and some of them so similar in the way that these women have felt in our system. And I think that is truly what motivates Kira and I to keep going and keep telling these stories, because we believe that shining a light on potential issues in our system can help others. And it really goes to the title of this series, Failure to Protect. I'll tell you, with each of these survivors, the thing they tell me, their real motivator in coming forward and putting themselves through all of this is they want to protect others. They want to protect others from potential perpetrators. Yeah. And in tonight's piece, you'll see the women want to protect others who might be going through this process and potentially have them have better experiences.
Absolutely. And just real quickly, Kira, from an executive, you put together a lot of stories. Tell us about putting this story together.
This is a story that's been 6 months in the making. It has been thousands of documents that we've gone through. Yeah. I don't even know how many interviews, multiple states, and, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lift.
We call that the big bite and the long chew. It is a big
We are
run.
glad to finally have it on the air for you.
Yeah, well, fantastic. We will watch for that 10 p.m. tonight on KSL TV. This is a crucial conversation, an uncomfortable one, but it's one we have to get to. Daniela Rivera, Kira Fairmont from KSL TV, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll continue to have that important conversation because it matters. The process matters. Justice matters, and the ability for these survivors to move forward matters even more. That wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll be back with hour number 2 coming up next on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dale Spalding. KSL's top story this hour: a man is in the ICU after being attacked by a grizzly bear just south of a resort town in Montana. Rudy Norlander is the owner of an all-terrain vehicle rental business. He was helping some renters when the grizzly attacked. He suffered severe injuries to his face and body. The attack only lasted a few minutes before hunters started firing at the bear. Wildlife officials believe the bear is dead, but they are still searching the area. Reports show as many as 1 out of every 4 children are being sextorted. Licensed psychologist and professor at BYU tells David Dujanovic we need to reassure our kids to make them feel safe, especially if they've been sexting with others.
What's happened is illegal, and it's uncomfortable, and there's a reason you feel so awful, right? It's because someone's done something wrong to you, and that's not your fault.
Experts say more than 80,000 cases of sextortion are reported every day. But occurrences of this crime are believed to be 300 times more prevalent than what is reported. It's likely that a woman will take up the 2nd District congressional seat in the race to replace Congressman Chris Stewart. This will be the 5th time this might happen in Utah's history. Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, Susan Madsen, tells David Dujanovic legislation is different when only men are making decisions in Congress.
When you have more women, you typically have more legislation on things that women tend to care about even more than men, like education, like health, like poverty, like resources for those that have been sexually assaulted or domestic violence.
Madsen says the dynamic in Congress changes drastically when there are equal members of men and women governing. Your money at this moment: the Dow down 16 points and the NASDAQ down 144 points. Coming up, clouds and showers in the forecast. KSL weather is next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9
on KSL News Radio.
Some things are better together, like burgers and fries, movies and popcorn, and auto and home insurance. At Farm Bureau Financial Services, we'll help you bundle your auto and home coverage in one policy, saving you money. And if a storm hits and both are damaged, you'll pay a single deductible. Find an agent at fbfs.com/protect. It's your future. Let's protect it. Farm Bureau Property and Casualty Insurance Company, Western Agricultural Insurance Company.
Imagine how inconvenient your life would be without power. No lights, no refrigeration, no heating or cooling, and no electronics. But with a Generac home standby generator, you'll have the power when you need it most. Generac generators automatically provide backup after sensing a power outage, so your life goes on uninterrupted. Schedule a free quote today with Genco Generators, your premier Generac service dealer in Utah. Call 801-295-0872 or online at gencogenerators.net.
Lennox technology and the people who stand behind it. That's what you could expect when you work with your local Lennox dealer. Call Climate Services. Your Lennox system, your Lennox dealer. They are truly perfect together, working together season after season to maintain your home's ultimate comfort. For a limited time, get up to $1,500 in rebates, or qualified buyers make no payments, incur no interest for 6 months when financing a new Lennox system. Plus, receive up to $3,200 in federal tax credits. Working with Call Climate Services means you're choosing the best in the business. Call today at 801-298-4810, 801-298-4810, or visit online at callclimate.com. Callclimate.com. Conditions apply. See dealer for details. Dealer license number 35823455501.
Found your dream house, but not your dream rate? Make your purchase with a home loan from Cypress Credit Union. Refinance within 12 months if rates drop, and Cypress Credit Union will take care of the refinancing fees.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Several problems out there. A crash in Centerville, Parish Lane at 400 West at the intersection. An accident with possible injuries. This is 500 South, about 1350 East on Redwood Road. 2 accidents, an auto pedestrian crash, Redwood at 7800 South, and then a crash with possible injuries in Bluffdale, Redwood Road, 140th South. Is your car due for some extra love? Burt Brothers is here for your vehicle's routine maintenance, all done by our ASE certified technicians. Burt Brothers, affordable, complete auto care done better. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we've got 20% showers today with a high of 83. Tonight we're dipping to 63 with partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow we've got isolated thunderstorms in the forecast with a high of 82. Right now it's 83 and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio 102.7 FM at 1160 AM and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When it comes to the economy, it feels like new inflation numbers are coming out regularly. For a lot of Americans, it's more of a feel thing. But for the Fed, it's all about the data. That's everything where you begin. Then the conversation can go somewhere important. Someone who looks at those numbers and listens to those stories every day is Mary Daly, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and she joins us live in studio. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, I have been looking forward to this conversation all week long to get beyond the headlines of the economy and all of those data points and talk with Mary Daly, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. It's great to have you back on the show, and it is fantastic to have you here in the state of Utah.
It's fantastic to be in the state of Utah, and as I've learned to say from all my years of travel here, it's the great state of Utah.
That's exactly right. Well, tell us about what you've been doing here in the state. You've had a jam-packed agenda. We know we're the last stop before you get to exhale, but tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I've just had a fantastic visit. We came on Wednesday. We spent, this is our 3rd day here, and really a big part of what we do while we're here is engage with the community, the business leaders, the people running small businesses, medium-sized businesses, global businesses, to learn how they're experiencing the economy. And we've learned a lot. You talked about data right at the top of your remarks, and the data are more than just the headline numbers that you see printed in the Wall Street Journal or another press media outlet. They're really the numbers that people look at when they look at their revenue books or their profitability or how hard it is to hire people, how much their input prices are rising. Those pieces of information help us shape the policy that we craft when we go back to the FOMC meeting.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that for a second in terms of helping our listeners understand the role of the San Francisco Fed. You got a big chunk of the country. It's 8 states here in the West, but it's a big chunk in places like Utah that used to be kind of a crossroads of the West and now is kind of a crossroads to the world in many instances business-wise. Give us some perspective in terms of what is the job and what's the task?
So the job is really we say we have a billboard at the front or a banner at the front of our bank that says our work serves every American and countless global citizens. And that's because of the work we do, which is given to us by Congress, is to create monetary policy that keeps the prices stable, low and stable, price inflation low and stable, and keeps everyone in America who wants a job able to work because jobs are plentiful and available. And those two goals we work hard to achieve. And one of the reasons we collect so much information from I have 9 states in the West, so I have 1/5 of the U.S. population in the district, the 12th district, and I go to all of these states to collect that information and be able to shape policy that really tries to work for every American.
And so let's look at those kind of those two components that I think everyone feels every day, and that is the inflation factor in terms of what the cost of goods are, and then that employment number.
Right.
How do you keep that proper balance between those, especially with what we've seen, particularly over the last year to 18 months?
Sure. So we do have those two goals, and one of them right now is still we're not achieving it, and that's the inflation part. I think everyone, inflation's coming down, thankfully, and people feel this directly in their pocketbooks, and businesses feel it directly on their bottom line, but it's still too high. We have a 2% inflation target. That's because 2% is about the rate where nobody thinks about inflation when they make decisions. You know, you don't have to worry about it. And we're not there yet. On the full employment side, on everybody who wants a job can find one, well, people can find multiple jobs now.
Right.
And it's really the employers who are having a challenging time finding workers. And, you know, even walking around Utah or walking around Salt Lake and seeing things, businesses are still just one staff person calling in sick away from having to say, we can't serve as many clients as we want. We can't have that shift open. So I still think the labor market's pretty tight, especially here in Utah. And, you know, bringing the economy to a slower and more sustainable pace of growth will just ease some of that employment pressure, but still allow people who want to work to get out there and find a number of jobs to choose from, but also give relief in that bottom line in those pocketbooks, which are important for people to save and to grow their families in the way that they want.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the real interesting challenges over the course of the last year in particular is kind of aligning a lot of the good news of the economy with what people are feeling around that kitchen table. There's not quite an alignment in all of those. How do you see that playing out, and what are you hearing around the district?
That's a terrific question. I'm so glad you asked it. So it's pretty easy to feel excitement, not so much as a policymaker, but certainly there's a lot of enthusiasm and inflation's coming down. So we spend a lot of time around those proverbial kitchen tables. We bring workers in, families, community groups in and say, how are people feeling about the economy? Are you still making trade-offs that feel like inflation's one of the only things you think about? And we're hearing that it's not just that inflation's been rising rapidly, but now the price of things that were much cheaper before the pandemic, eggs often come up. Eggs are 3 times the price that they once were. And if you're a family of 4 or 5 or 6 that needs eggs, well, you're feeling that pain. And that feels material to people. So it's not just about eggs, of course. It's about transportation, housing, food. It's about energy. It's about just doing the things. Everything's more expensive than it used to be. And so the Fed's job is to get that rate of price increases down and allow the economy to settle back out so that people feel like the dollar they earn not only holds value, but then allows them to make the investment, spending, and savings decisions that they want to.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about your approach to all of this is, one, just your curiosity, and that you want to go out and you want to hear those stories. You want to have those conversations. And so as you've done that here in the state of Utah, give us a sense of what have you been hearing, and what are those stories, and how is that going to influence those policy decisions moving forward?
So I have heard something that's really heartening. I have heard people taking a deep breath and maybe a little bit of a sigh of relief. So I was here, 6 months ago, and what I saw were people who felt the economy was frantic. So on the employer side, they're just frantically trying to get workers. They're talking about 80% turnover rates. You can't keep people a week. And that was stressful, right? Because you can't hit your bottom line if you can't keep workers. On the worker side, I was hearing, I keep trying to change jobs just to make an extra dollar because inflation's eroding my well-being and I can't afford to take care of my family like I expect to. So those two things have diminished and people feel a little bit of relief. And I see that as a very positive development. So then the next question I ask is, what are you worried about? And they're still worried about inflation, wanting the Fed's policy to continue to work to bring inflation down so that they don't have to think about it.
Right.
But they want to make sure we do it as gently as we can so we don't end up causing another problem, which is we tip over the economy and they lose their jobs. And my job is to reassure them that my approach is bring inflation down, be resolute to do that, absolutely committed, but also be thoughtful and patient to do it well without tipping the economy over.
Yeah, man, that is the ultimate high wire act that
is,
you get
indeed.
to do every day. And you talked about this in the Washington Post about a week or so ago, talking about kind of that exhaustion pulsing through. I love how you describe it in terms of people having kind of an exhale moment is so important. So what's next? What are the things that you're watching for as we move into the fall? Of course, we got a lot of politics surrounding all of this that often gets in the way of good economic policy. But what are you watching for?
So here's what I'm watching for. I want to continue to see the inflation numbers coming down. I really don't want to see those flatten out. And we're not going to be satisfied with it stuck at 4% or even 3.5%, 3%. We need to have it bring down to 2%. I want to see that the labor market continues to slow. We need about 100,000 jobs per month. We're adding about 200,000 jobs per month. So we're still twice as fast as we need to be if we're going to get wages growing at a sustainable pace. We're going to get that frantic feeling to totally go away. We're going to have that exhale moment be sort of a series of calm that kind of bleeds into next year. That's what I'm looking for. And in terms of risks, I'm going to be watching for abrupt changes. Either momentum picks up in a way we didn't expect, or we get a lot more slowing than we've forecast in. So both of those things, it's a period of time where we want to be managing risks, and that's another reason to be thoughtful and patient as we continue to make policy decisions, because really we have policy in a great place, and we have the time to be cautious and thoughtful as we make the next decision.
Yeah, so important. Between tapping the brake and pushing the gas, that is the constant ebb and flow of all of that.
And I grew up in the Midwest, and they also told you that there was a way where you can just coast without being on the brake or the gas as you determine what you're going to do next. So there are three positions: brake, gas, wait.
And that waiting is probably the hardest, I think.
It is the hardest thing.
Especially for politicians who always want to either hit the brake or pump on the gas. Coasting is not
I think for humans, probably being on the brake or the gas is the instinct we all have.
Yeah. And you talk about your Midwest upbringing. I want to take just a second, because I think it's so important for listeners to understand that we have someone making policy that's impacting all of us who really gets it. And going from a high school dropout to the president and CEO of the San Francisco Fed is no small journey. Will you just give us a snapshot of that so people can say, all right, she gets it?
Well, I think I do get it in this way. I saw it. I saw my parents struggle with high inflation back in the 70s, and they were making those kitchen table decisions where they were putting bills to one side because we obviously couldn't pay all of them at once. And then when we got the inflation down, they lost their jobs. And the consequences, now you're really caught in a bind. And I took that with me, even when I didn't really know it. And it just gave me the power and the will to move from, dropped out of high school to help support my family, but then found a mentor. Mentorship couldn't be more important in our society and our economy. Found a mentor. She nudged me to keep going. And ultimately, when I got my PhD, I feel like I got it in a way that is basically to help the people who I lived near, and they didn't have a voice and they didn't have a place at the table. I am trying to be their place at the table.
I absolutely love that. Give us one thing quickly that you wish we were talking about when it comes to the economy in this country.
So one thing I think has gotten left behind in this whole discussion of the pandemic and how we're going to come out of that and high inflation is the workforce of our economy is critical, and ensuring that our people are capable and ready and getting lifelong training so that they can be whoever they need to be and want to be to continue to participate in the labor force. That's going to be critical. Utah has this very low unemployment rate, but I was very pleased to see that the community colleges and the universities are really trying to create opportunities that no matter what you want to do, whether you want a 4-year degree or a 3-month certificate, you have a place and you have a roadmap to get to the economy of tomorrow. That's what I want us to be talking about.
That's Mary Daly. She's the president and CEO of the San Francisco Fed. It was so great to have her in studio. She's an extraordinary soul and an incredible journey from being a high school dropout to getting her GED to having a mentor get her into college, ultimately getting a PhD, and working all the way to become the president and CEO of the San Francisco Fed is an amazing journey. But it's given her unique perspective in a real humanistic way. Often we think of the Fed and the dollars and cents and numbers of it all. She understands what happens in a small business. She understands what happens in community. And so you don't always have to agree with her policy decision, but you have to know that she listens, that she gets it, she understands the lived experience, and that usually leads us to far better outcomes when it comes to policy.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. This autumn, fall for the KSL hosts who share this community with you and report on Utah's most important stories. Depend on Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Listen to David Dujanovic at 9, Boyd Matheson at 1, and Jeff Kaplan on the ride home from 3 to 7. We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors. I want you to know that it's the little things that count. Any remodeler can say they treat customers right when it comes to siding, gutters, windows, and exteriors. It's hard to know for sure. If a contractor uses cheap generic nails instead of super grippy ridge shaft nails for your siding, would you even know? If they use cheap $4 caulk to install your new windows instead of paying $9 a tube for the good stuff, could you tell by looking? It all comes down to the details and trust. At RGS Exteriors, we only do things one way, the right way. We never cut corners. We never skimp on details. We never do less than the job requires. That's why we offer our industry's exclusive 10-year everything guarantee. And it's why we have the happiest customers. If you need any gutters, siding, or replacement windows, call RGS Exteriors at 801-280-3110 or visit rgsutah.com. That's 801-280-3110 or online at rgsutah.com.
At Shields, we know good things happen when preparation meets opportunity, which means during the season, the only element of the hunt we can actually control is the work we put in and the gear we trust. So stop by the Shields sale event September 9th through the 17th and save on brands you can trust, like Sitka, Lucky Duck, Benelli, and select Shields Outfitters gear. Our Shields experts are ready to prepare you for success on your next upland and waterfowl adventure. Shields, earn your moment.
Hey guys, do you know what makes Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City different? You. Every Revive treatment and medication is personalized just for you. Revive has the experts that guys go to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their daily performance. Since 2011, they've helped thousands of local men suffering with the symptoms of low T and ED. Their goal is simple, to get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. Your best performance requires more than generic ED medications or a low-dose testosterone booster at a low-ball price like you find online. Revive medications are custom compounded, affordable, and guaranteed to resolve your issues. Stop dealing with the symptoms of low T or ED. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit us at revivemenshealth.com.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dale Spalding. First, Google is in Washington today. The company is the defendant in an anti-monopoly case. They're accused of doing this through agreements with mobile phone manufacturers and browser makers to make its search engine the default for consumers. It's the first ever major tech monopoly trial in the U.S. Second, Salt Lake City police are seeking help in solving a 1980 murder. Celadon Archuleta was found dead inside his home near 900 South, 900 West. The department's homicide squad says it has exhausted all of its leads, but not identified a suspect. They're asking anyone who might have information to contact the department and can do so anonymously. Third, travelers to I-15 at the end of the month might see smoke from the mountains near Beaver. It will be part of a prescribed burn set for the area near Strawberry Peak. Forest officials are advising drivers not to report the controlled fire. Right now it's 84 and partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
There's so much happening on the world stage, and so much is impacted by American diplomacy. American diplomacy has been tested around the world, and we're actually going to spend the next two segments of the program talking about diplomacy. Good, bad, and indifferent, and what it really means. We're going to start dealing with some of the situations that were more formally announced today in terms of the Biden administration deciding to unfreeze $6 billion worth of Iranian funds in return for the release of 5 American hostages. We'll break that down a little bit. And then coming up at 2:35, we're going to be joined by former Ambassador Ronald Newman. And he's been an ambassador 3 times in some pretty amazing places. Also an important role in government, and he's seen these diplomatic dances up close and personal. So stay with us for the next 2 segments as we talk about American diplomacy. What is America's role in the world, and how does this all happen? What is the role of those diplomats and those people behind the scenes that are often making the big events relevant and actually meaningful? And so, as I said, let's start with Iran. Looking at what's going on there. Again, the Biden administration had announced previously and is now moving forward on unfreezing $6 billion worth of Iranian funds in exchange for the release of 5 American hostages. So we want to get into what are the terms of the deal. More importantly, what are the ramifications for unfreezing $6 billion? What does that mean moving forward? So let's start at the State Department. Earlier today, spokesman Matt Miller said that getting these Americans home was a top priority for the administration, and negotiations like this are always tough, but felt that they made the necessary choice.
Iran is not going to release these American citizens out of the goodness of their heart. That is not real life. That is not how this works. That was never going to happen. We have to make tough choices and engage in tough negotiations to bring these American citizens home. There were 5 American citizens who have been jailed under brutal conditions, one of them for more than 8 years, and the Secretary and the President decided that we need to do everything we can to bring them home, and that's what we're doing.
So, again, that's laying out the case there. Obviously, these 5 Americans, one of them for more than 8 years, that's a tough thing, and makes you wonder what else has been happening along the way or not happening along the way that might have made this a little easier process. And now we want to look at the ramifications of it. Again, in light of a lot of other Americans being held around the world, not just in Iran. Recently, I had a great discussion about the deal being struck between America and Iran. And we got into this idea with Benham Ben Taleblu, talking about the ramifications that this kind of deal, the messages that it sends around the world. Take a listen.
Being able to give Iran $1.2 billion per hostage, because that's technically what it amounts to if you do the math, you have just incentivized the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism with a demonstrated track record of hostage diplomacy, who has proxies who have done hostage taking, and who has global state partners like Russia, which has used the detainee issue against Americans to take more hostages. So I would expect a surge, not just in terms of the foreign citizens and dual nationals, in particular the Iranian Americans who come and go between the U.S. and Iran and who see their families. You've just put a target on all of their heads. Tehran can collect on them more. But also I would expect Iran's state-level partners like Russia and China to find a way to add hostage-taking into their array of threats they already pose against the U.S.
So I do think we have to be careful. It is a very clear message, $1.2 billion per hostage. If you break down the 5 hostages, you're incentivizing Iran to keep doing this kind of behavior, and others around the world. Proxies, partners will continue to do this as they see that America can be targeted this way. Now, on the flip side of that, going back to Matt Miller from the State Department, he defended the administration's reasoning on the deal. He said, unlike the previous administration, the funds provided to Iran would have careful oversight. That's an interesting phrase. We'll come back to it. Oversight so that they're only spent on humanitarian purposes and that they can refreeze the funds if necessary.
That may have been the policy under the previous administration, where these accounts were allowed to be spent for purposes that we cannot track. It is not the policy of this administration, and it is not the arrangement that will be in place here. The facts of this arrangement are, when this money arrives in these accounts in Qatar, it will be held there under strict oversight by the United States Treasury Department, and the money can only be used for humanitarian purposes, and we will remain vigilant in watching the spending of those funds and have the ability to freeze them again if we need to.
All right, that's a little bit of a head scratcher for me, not going to lie, coming out of the State Department to say that the administration will have oversight over how these accounts are spent, that they can only be used for humanitarian purposes. We have a hard time having oversight over nuclear testing and a host of other things going on inside of that country. I am not confident that we will be able to have oversight in terms of how these funds are spent or moved. And once they're moved, there's no chance that we can have any kind of meaningful oversight at all. So I question that. What can be refrozen? I'm not sure how that plays out either. I think that might be a little more wishful thinking than strategy and tactics in terms of the negotiations. Earlier today, Senator John Cornyn from Texas gave his reaction to the deal and said that in relationship to Iran, the sanctions aren't worth anything if we're willing to just give them access back to frozen funds.
You know, we have sanctions in place to try to discourage the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, which is Iran, from developing a nuclear weapon. But it doesn't do much good when the Biden administration decides to write him a $6 billion check. I have zero confidence in the Biden administration's ability to monitor the expenditure of these funds.
Utah Representative John Curtis was on, formerly known as Twitter, on X, talking about the release of these funds and the fact that funds are fungible. In other words, $6 billion to Iran frees up $6 billion that they can spend on other things like threatening Israel, arming Russia in its war against Ukraine, building up terrorist proxies across the Middle East, and more. And so a lot of interesting reaction going on there. And so we'll continue this conversation. Stay with us. Former Ambassador Ron Newman is going to join us to talk about the delicate dance of diplomacy coming up next on Inside Sources. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dale Spalding. KSL's top story this hour, an uptick of coyote encounters in Sandy and Draper are affecting residents and their pets. KSL News Radio's Eric Cabrera has the story.
Sandy and Draper, like many cities in Utah, have numerous trails and open spaces for humans and wildlife alike to explore. But with both police departments having out-of-the-ordinary reports of coyote attacks and sightings, there are important tips to remember to minimize attracting coyotes and wildlife in general.
Make sure you're supervising your pets when they're outside. Don't leave them alone outside, and especially after dark, kind of those dawn, dusk times. And then keep them leashed, especially when you're hiking or you're on trails or things like that, just so they can't potentially run off.
That was Faith Jolly with Utah's Division of Wildlife Resources. Jolly also recommends finding out how we can better coexist with our wildlife friends at wildawareutah.org. Eric Cabrera, KSL News Radio.
A new rule proposed by the U.S. Department of Labor would promote worker advocacy protection and safe transportation. KSL News Radio's Hugo Ricard Bell explains.
Under this proposed new rule, you could campaign freely for better conditions. It's specifically targeted towards H-2A visa farm workers, who make up a substantial majority of Utah's ag labor. It also specifies that employers can only be fired for not meeting pre-specified productivity standards or policy. The rule also includes things like proposals to make wages more reliable.
The proposed rulemaking will be open for public comment for 60 days before being considered for final publication. Your money at this moment, the Dow down 17 points and the NASDAQ down 144 points. Coming up, rain and thunderstorms in the forecast. KSL weather is next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
At Fisher Investments, we do things differently, and other money managers don't understand why.
Because our way works great for us.
But it may not work for your clients. That's why Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, obligated to put clients first. It's the highest standard for a financial advisor.
So, what do you provide? Cookie-cutter portfolios like the rest of us?
No cookie-cutter portfolios here. Fisher Investments tailors portfolios to meet each client's goals and needs.
But you do sell investments that earn you high commissions, right? And make commissions when you make trades for your clients?
No, Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission investment products, and we never earn commissions on trades.
So what's in it for you?
Fisher Investments fees are structured so we do better when our clients do better. When it comes to helping clients achieve a comfortable retirement, we're clearly different. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments, clearly different money management.
Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Join the Utah Symphony for the greatest classical hits from the 1700s to today. Tickets start at $21. Get yours today at utahsymphony.org.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A good drive still in progress on the Valley freeways, but crews are still on the scene of an accident in Davis County in Centerville, Parish Lane at 400 West. The Utah RV Super Show at Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy, September 14th through 17th. Get information and discount passes at UtahRVSupershow.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Your KSL weather, partly cloudy and a 20% chance for a shower today with a high of 83. Tomorrow we've got isolated thunderstorms with a forecast high of 82. Right now it's 84 and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We are thrilled to have in studio with us today Ronald Newman. Of course, he was formerly a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, also a three-time ambassador in some pretty amazing places, Algeria, Bahrain, and Afghanistan. And Ambassador Newman, it's great to have you in the studio.
Oh, thank you. It's super to be here. You know, in between two of those ambassadorships, I also spent 16 months in Iraq as one of the sort of extra ambassadors they send up to help out.
Yeah, and there was definitely a need for more ambassadors and more diplomacy in all of those. And I know you have a big event tonight talking about the importance of citizen diplomacy. We're going to hold on to that one for a second because I want to start with this broader context in terms of diplomacy. We often talk about Utah being not just a crossroads to the west, but a crossroads to the world. And diplomacy is a big part of that and impacts it in so many ways. And so start with kind of a 30,000-foot level of what is the job and the role of diplomacy and why does it matter so much today?
Great question because I appreciate it. Two of the things that connect Utah to the world, they're the big issues, that connect America to the world. National security, climate, trade issues. When you see people coming out of a conference with some forward movement on one of those issues, it represents not just a conference, it represents hundreds and thousands of hours of work by people around the world, American diplomats with others, to craft those agreements before people show up at the conference. If you don't have the diplomacy underpinning it, the conference is a nice touristic event.
Yeah.
Secondly, you have, of course, these big national security issues of trade, of defense, of wars. Wars, the last war that ended with the military only was World War II. Ever since then, the diplomats have been picking up the pieces, whether they help craft them or whether they get to sweep up the floor. It's the diplomats who are picking up the pieces at the end of a war.
Yeah.
Also, the more non-military tasks get thrown to the military in wars like Afghanistan and Iraq that they're not trained to do, they don't have the people to do them. Either they do them badly or they're diverting people from their main mission. And if you keep adding those missions to the military, you're also cutting down combat readiness. So and I served also as an infantry officer in Vietnam, so I have some understanding.
You have some street cred
I have some street cred there, which has been helpful with my military colleagues. But so that's the big sort of high level. But look at trade. Utah, as I looked at some statistics the other night, a couple of years out of date, so it's probably more now, but it was almost $38 billion of money in Utah alone in export trade outside the United States.
Yeah.
Well, it's the diplomats who negotiate on things like standards. Can you compete if they screw up the standards so that they favor somebody else, like the Europeans or the Chinese? Can you keep the Chinese out of 5G networks so that it favors us not only commercially, but in terms of all kinds of security issues and cybersecurity? That's part of diplomacy. Now, you've got a huge hospitality industry, about $10 billion a year. You got two parts of that. One is you've got people to staff it. Well, part of that is temporary workers.
Yeah.
If you can't issue the visas because we don't have enough people in our embassies, you can't get some of the people you need. If you can't issue visas to the foreigners, if a rich foreign businessman who's not from a country that gets easy visa acceptance, who doesn't have to have visas, wants to go to the United States take the family, spend a lot of money, and they tell you it's a year's wait for a visa. He's going to Australia or Europe or someplace. The money's not coming here.
Yeah.
So you've got these issues. You've also got the issues. Another issue of the State Department is passports.
Right.
Have you tried to get a passport lately? There is a huge delay. If you pay $60 extra, you can get it down to, I think, 2.5 months. If you want to make a trip tomorrow, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
The State Department is hiring more people. But they all have to have security clearances because you don't want passports just going off to anybody. So that takes time. Now, one of the issues, and we'll talk about it, I think, later, this report we've done is setting up a foreign service reserve, setting up a diplomatic reserve.
Yeah.
If you had that reserve, you'd have people to draw on to staff the passport office until you can bring your hirings on board. You'd have people to staff an embassy to bring the visa issuance back up to speed until you got more people.
Yeah.
Part of it's there's a huge backlog from COVID.
Right,
So
right.
You got to work your way through the backlog. If you had a reserve, you could deal with that. We don't have a reserve. We have reserves for military. We don't have it for diplomacy.
Yeah, and
so business, visas, temporary workers, competing with the Chinese in Africa where they outnumber us anywhere from 4 to 10 to 1 in commercial officers in every country. Those are all parts of diplomacy that all have local impacts.
I love that, and this is, I know most people were not waking up this morning thinking, I wonder how all of this impacts my world. And I love you pulling back the curtain there because there are so many levels of diplomacy, and starting at that very highest level when we see G20 summits or we see these big international things, it's the hard work and heavy lifting of the diplomats behind the scenes that actually make those things actually matter beyond a photo op.
Yeah.
And so that's an important thing for us to recognize. But then you start that trickle down in terms of all of these other areas, from passports to standards for our businesses so we can compete in a global economy. I think those are also important. I want to dig in a little bit more to this whole idea of having a reserve of diplomats. We just haven't gone down that path as a nation. And I think beyond passports and all of that, there's some real crucial things, I think, for the future.
It's huge. It's been huge in the past. And one area that people think of a lot, of course, is wars. We had a huge need for a diplomatic surge in Afghanistan and Iraq. State Department could not meet that need. I was back in Afghanistan. I used to travel there regularly, even after I retired. I remember one division commander telling me about 2010, I feel a civilian surge lapping at my ankles. I mean, it wasn't very, this wasn't really a high water mark.
Yeah.
So the State Department did badly because it has no equivalent of undeployed unit. Military has units when they're not at war, they're training. They could be sent someplace.
Yeah.
We don't have that. Yeah. We don't have the reserves to send to either long-term professional education, which people have been saying for years we do a crummy job of, and we don't have the people to staff. But it's not only a war. Look at the pandemic, when thousands of people had to be evacuated from all over the world, and it took diplomats all kinds of places, negotiating with foreign governments, opening airports, chartering planes, moving people back home. Boy, when they wanted that now.
You never know how bad you need a diplomat until you need a diplomat, and then nothing else will do.
Absolutely.
I think that's such an important thing, and again, it's not one that we think about every day, but the impact is so huge. I've been dying to ask you this question because, in my perspective, China has been leaning in and flexing its influence and muscle militarily, economically, but they've really been pushing on the diplomatic front, even in places like the Middle East and in Africa. How do you see what China is doing on the diplomatic front, and what should we be worried about here at home?
Let me give you one example. In the Pacific, we pulled out of a lot of smaller island nations after the Cold War. We didn't need the listening stations, so we don't need those people. And the Chinese have started moving in. That slants where they go with contracts. It slants where they go with 5G communications. We're now reestablishing embassies in about 4 or 5 different Pacific island nations, but we're behind. We're playing catch up.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there. Let's talk about the focus of your event tonight and your speech tonight, talking about citizen diplomacy. How do we take this all the way down to the individual citizen level?
Well, one level, of course, is there are levels where citizens are involved directly, but there are also levels where diplomacy impacts the citizen. And we've talked about some of those visas, evacuations, also, if you're in trouble overseas or if you're a small businessman. There's something like 3,500 companies in Utah alone that are defined as small business in the export business. They're 85% of the export business. And they don't have the skills to open up new markets on their own. That's where you need diplomatic help.
Yeah.
Not to mention, of course, falling sick overseas, getting arrested, or occasionally having to ship back a loved one that isn't coming back on their own.
Yeah. Those are all definite challenges there as well. What's the one thing that you wish we were talking more about as it relates to diplomacy and America's role in the world?
There's one thing right at home, and that's money. You can't do these things without proper funding.
Yeah.
And there's a tendency in some people to say, who needs this diplomacy stuff? And also to exaggerate massively what it costs. A lot of people think there's a huge cost of foreign aid. It's less than 1% of our budget. Another issue is, we want to establish this Foreign Service Reserve. What's that going to cost? That's going to cost about $45 million a year. $45 million, that's half the cost of one F-35 fighter to give the United States an incredible move forward in its ability to respond to crises.
Yeah.
So people need to see this stuff, whether it's in the micro level or the macro, in perspective.
Yeah. Oh, love that. That's such an important part of this conversation. And finally, before I let you go, give us one thing that's on your radar, that may be below the radar for the rest of us, that you're kind of watching in terms of trends and influence in the world.
This is no longer the unipolar United States. We no longer have quite the same ability to just get everybody else to fall in line. I mean, it's probably exaggerated how much we have. But more countries are looking to, can they depend on us? And if they're not sure of that, what other interests do they have? So we have to learn, we're not going to go back to being this massive, we'll just tell you what to do and you can do it. We're going to have to work with them. That doesn't mean we have to do everything their way, but we have to understand what are their critical bottom lines. What are the things we have to pay attention to and not just throw our weight around.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to sneak in one more question because I can.
You're presumably the boss.
Yeah. Well, no. Bella is the boss, and I just asked the questions. But another question I wanted to get to is we often talk about this delicate dance of diplomacy and just how tricky it is in places like Afghanistan, in different places around the world. You've lived that dance. You've done that dance in a lot of different, even hostile environments. What is the real art and science to diplomacy that we should be thinking about?
Basic is remembering that what we want is to get foreigners to do what we want them to do and to like it enough that we can work with them again on the next issue, because diplomacy never ends. But I think what I'd like people to carry away as well is diplomacy is not just about making nice. It's not about being mealy-mouthed. It is about finding ways to deliver the message that don't insult or injure the person you're talking to so that they won't talk to you again. Now, compromise is not a dirty word, but it's also a question of what's the bottom line for us. It's not always about giving things away. Diplomacy is, in the words of an old joke, telling someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip.
That is it. I think that is absolutely it. And it is about not just being nice, because there is a part of that dance that requires that confidence to have the hard conversation.
Yeah. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not being diplomatic, thinking being diplomatic means you don't say the hard thing. No, being diplomatic means you say the hard thing in a way that does not get the other person instantly opposed to you. I had a wise Egyptian ambassador tell me once, if you start by saying, you're wrong, my back is up and I'm resisting. If you start by saying, well, I understand what you're saying, but I have a little different perspective, my mind is open to listening to you.
Yeah.
That's, in a nutshell, what you're talking about.
Yeah, man, that's one every citizen can apply today. And I don't care if you're doing it at your kitchen table or in your community or for the entire country. Ronald Newman, so delightful to have you in studio. We appreciate your service to our country as a diplomat, as someone who understands this dance and that diplomacy never ends. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to folk in this part of the world.
Great perspective there. In fact, we're going to round out the day coming up in just a moment with some final thoughts about the delicate dance of diplomacy and what each of us need to do to be better diplomats at home, in the community, and across the country. Stick around. More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
Embrace the majesty of the great outdoors and celebrate Bryce Canyon National Park's 100th birthday at Ruby's Inn. Skip the long lines and expensive hotel rooms and escape to the American West. Ride, hike, bike, and play among the towering hoodoos right in Ruby's backyard. Embrace your inner cowboy and take a guided horseback tour across the rim of Bryce Canyon. And no trip to Ruby's Inn is complete without dinner and a show at Ebenezer's Barn and Grill. After a long day of adventure, spend your nights in a cozy hotel room or camp out in a rustic campground. With affordable and varied lodging options, any family will feel right at home at Ruby's Inn. For some extra savings, be sure to take advantage of the hot deals running throughout the year. This year, treat your family to the adventure of a lifetime. Book your trip today at ruby'sinn.com. That's ruby'sinn.com.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit. And make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Doug Wright, and there are good things in the air. You can feel it, you can see it, you can experience it. Football, the kids are back in school. It's beginning to cool off a little bit. Fall is in the air, and a great place to go this fall for the best meal you've ever had. It's Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Now let's talk about going up to the mountains where the leaves are just beginning to turn. It's going to be gorgeous. And at Hotel Park City, there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse waiting for you. So many things are going on in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City, and there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse downtown for you as well at 275 South West Temple. That steak that you've been longing for, cooked to perfection, the perfect temperature, the side dishes, the desserts. They're at both locations of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. So call and make your reservations now. When Dee and I ate there the other night, it was so delicious, so good. That first bite, you're going to love it at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Here's a question. Do you wear dentures? At Grandpa's Dental, you can trade in your floppy dentures and get $2,000 towards an implant-supported solution. You know, they say the older you get, the more you need your teeth. Well, chewing your food isn't a luxury. And taking a bite out of a nice, juicy steak, well, it takes teeth. At Grandpa's Dental, they have over 10,000 restorations under their belt, and it's always affordable. When you walk into one of their 3 locations, you're family, period. At Grandpa's Dental, they live their family legacy by building lasting relationships through state-of-the-art services. So if you want to stop the flop and actually eat foods you can chew, trade in your dentures at Grandpa's Dental for $2,000 toward your implant solution. Schedule your free consultation at grandpasdental.com today. That's grandpasdental.com.
Common Spirit Holy Cross Hospitals carry the legacy of its namesake and care for northern Utah's communities as part of 20 hospitals and 240 clinics across Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Visit holycrossutah.org.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dale Spaulding. First, temporary farm workers in Utah could get more protections under a new rule proposed by the Federal Department of Labor. Second, travelers on I-15 will see a prescribed burn later this month on the mountains near Beaver's Strawberry Peak. Forest officials are advising drivers not to report the fire. Third, Google is in court today. It's the first ever major tech anti-monopoly trial in the U.S. Right now it's 84 and partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as it always is. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, if you've missed the last couple of segments of the show, you're going to want to go back and listen to the podcast a little later on this afternoon. We've been talking about the delicate dance of diplomacy. We've seen it going on as the administration has negotiated with Iran for the release of 5 American hostages to the tune of $6 billion in frozen assets being released back to Iran as part of that deal. There's obviously a lot of ramifications, and there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in terms of the diplomatic channels on that. We've also seen, of course, just over the last weekend, President Biden was at the G20 summit. There were some common things that were hammered out, some statements issued from the G20 partners, and those are all hammered out because of diplomats and the diplomatic corps and their efforts. And often that goes unseen and unsung, but they really do the tough stuff far away from the cameras and the headlines. But they're a critical part of all of that. And so there are lessons for us as well. I love the fact that we had former Ambassador Ron Newman on the show with us in the last segment talking about these roles and how they actually do impact us day to day. It impacts all of us. We talked about how right here in the state of Utah, we have such an international connection as a crossroads to the world. And we have so many entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses and large businesses in this state who are dependent on diplomats to make sure that there are standards, that there are rules as you try to open up a business or expand a business into another country. And a lot of that requires diplomats. If you've gotten a passport or a visa recently, or if you've ever been overseas and fallen ill or had a problem or had a loved one have a problem, I'm telling you, I said this to the ambassador, you never know that you need an ambassador or a diplomat until you need an ambassador or a diplomat, and then nothing else will do. And it is so true. And I love this whole idea that he put forward that they've been working on in terms of having, like we have a military reserve, we really need a diplomatic reserve. We saw this play out during the pandemic, that suddenly we needed to get all of these people back to the United States, charter planes, deal with countries coming in, going out, transitioning through in order to get American citizens home at the beginning of the pandemic. And that's a big diplomatic lift, and it requires some very skilled people. And so why not have a diplomatic reserve where we can keep people up to speed? They can backfill in some of these countries when necessary, when we need an extra surge, so to speak, of diplomatic effort. So I think those are all interesting things to look at, and it does impact all of us. Of course, tourism here in the state of Utah, another big thing. And all of those people from other countries don't get here without the diplomatic corps doing their job to make it easier for people to get into the country that qualify to come here either as tourists or on green cards and all the other options there in terms of immigration. So there's a lot of things happening there on the diplomatic front. But I also think equally as important, there are the lessons of diplomacy. And in our conversation with former Ambassador Ron Newman, we talked about the fact that it's not about just niceties. Sometimes we misuse the phrase, I wasn't very diplomatic, as if niceties were enough. And it's not. A true diplomat says the hard thing, but says it well, and says it in a way that the other person can actually listen to it. Often I think that's done in the form of a question, becoming one of the lost arts in the world today. And diplomats do this incredibly well. Rather than just saying, hey, you're wrong, we're right, and you have that battle. It's why most words in an argument, especially with a spouse or a loved one, are never even heard. Because once we decide I'm right and you're wrong, the listening is over. So instead, be a little more diplomatic in your approach. Again, you don't have to change your position or your belief at all. But just phrase it in the form of the question. Say, well, had you considered this? Or if we tried this strategy, would that solve the problem? Had you ever considered what would happen if we took this step instead of that step? And so you're not changing your position at all, but you're creating space for a different kind of conversation to take place. And that's the art of diplomacy, is being able to say the hard things when the hard things need to be said, but having built up enough emotional capital so that you can say the hard things, so that you can have that authentic, honest conversation. Because if we don't get to those, we never get to solve any of the real issues of our day. And that's the real test for all of us. Can we have those conversations at home? Can we have them with our children or our spouse or loved ones? Can we have those conversations in our community? Can we have them in our state and in our nation? Can we have them amongst citizens? And especially, can our lawmakers model what that looks like? Diplomacy can be a delicate dance, but the skills are very simple. Even a fifth grader understands what those are all about. Well, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.